Hello! Today I'd like to share with you some psychology research, as researched by Sandy Mann from the University of Central Lancashire. It's about boring people. Now, as a teacher, I often complain to colleagues and they to me that our students can be, to a greater or lesser extent, somewhat boring. I know that might sound harsh, so please let me explain. A lot of young people don't seem to have any hobbies or interests nowadays. As I hear very often, when I ask, "Did you have a good weekend?" many students reply either no, or tell me that they slept or stayed in their room. I and my colleagues find this rather sad. Similarly, we find that many students have very little interest in many of the topics and the themes of the lessons that they're taught. Not all students and not all topics, I hasten to add, but enough to make it noticeable. I guess that many young adults go through this phase of not being interested in very much. The sports you perhaps played at school or other after-school activities that you used to do are maybe not so accessible once you leave school. I remember leaving school and trying to find a football team. The local team was full of what I considered at that time to be boring old guys. I still played for the team because I enjoyed playing football rather than for the socialising aspect of the team. Anyway, get a hobby, it makes you more interesting. However, there are some hobbies that might appear more interesting than others. English has a few words to describe people who have boring hobbies. We might call them anoraks or train spotters. The terms geek or nerd often refer to people who are very interested in computers particularly, or technology more generally, and these people often lack the social skills because they spend all of their time in front of a screen rather than in front of people. This research by Sandy Mann focused on one particular anorak, a man called Peter Willis. He was judged to be so boring by a national newspaper in the UK, they gave him the title, "The Most Boring Man in Britain." I can hear you asking, what is his hobby? So, he's a retired postman, and he likes to take photographs of post boxes. Post boxes are the red boxes where you put your letters, your birthday cards, that sort of thing, that you send to people usually in a different town or city, or a different country. Apparently there are 115,000 post boxes in the UK, and Peter Willis wants to photograph all of them. So let's consider at this point the two words boredom and boring. Boredom is a noun, and the dictionary tells me that it means the state of being bored. Tedium. Tedium in turn means the state of being bored, or the quality of being boring. Monotony. So they're not very helpful definitions. Boring is an adjective to describe either someone or something who or that is dull, repetitious, or uninteresting. Now, if Peter Willis, the guy who wants to photograph the post boxes, sat next to me on a long train journey or a long haul flight and told me all about his hobby for the duration of that journey, I think I would find him boring, because post boxes don't really interest me. Therefore, I might suffer from boredom. But boredom is more usually associated with not having anything to do, like if you're waiting for a bus or a train to arrive, or needing to kill time before you do something else. You might suffer from boredom because you have nothing to do and nowhere to go. Peter Willis is rarely bored, however. He doesn't suffer from boredom because he has something that interests him. Now, whether that makes him a boring person is another matter. If he doesn't continually talk about his hobby then I guess you could not call him boring. And that is the main point that the researcher wants to make. Our definitions of boring need to be changed. Peter Willis might certainly be called an anorak or slightly odd, but is he boring? Probably not. Let's take another example. Fishing. When I take my dog for a walk along the canal near my home, I often see a few men sitting by the side of the canal trying to catch fish. Now, to me, this is a crushingly dull activity. It is, like I just said, waiting for a train or a bus, except in this case, these guys are waiting for a fish to bite their hook. There are not many fish in the canal, so I guess they have to wait quite a long time for the fish. To me, it's a boring activity. To the fisherman, it can't be. Perhaps the fisherman was bored at home, which is why he has gone to the canal to catch fish. It's not boring to him. Our perceptions are just different. The researcher found that Mr. Willis was not actually boring at all. He has a range of interests, so he does not only talk about post boxes. Thus my concerns about meeting him on a train or a plane are therefore unfounded. So what makes a hobby a boring hobby? I wouldn't want to go fishing by the canal, but other people clearly do. My wife doesn't like cycling with me because she says at the speeds I go she can't enjoy looking at the countryside. She therefore finds it boring. It's a fair point. I don't cycle to look at the countryside particularly. Not sure why I enjoy it really, but okay. The researcher concluded that what people term boring hobbies tend to be those that demand a lot of attention to details that are very technical, obscure or narrow in range. This leads to the hobbyist having excessive knowledge about something which only a small minority of people share even a little interest in. Often the subject of their interest tends to be something rather mundane or everyday, such as letterboxes. They are also activities done alone and without the need for other people's help or input. Unlike, say, parachuting, which requires someone to fly the plane, and maybe a safety expert, or antique collecting, which requires a seller as well as a buyer, or more obvious hobbies like team sports, where obviously you work together with your team. Sandy Mann hypothesizes that people with these mundane interests are less likely to suffer from mental health issues. This is because they take time to appreciate the beauty and the joy of simple, ordinary, everyday things, instead of endlessly searching for new thrills in our fast-paced world, which can leave you disappointed and, over time, depressed when it becomes more difficult to achieve that thrill. Mann also claims that boredom can help you to be more creative. I think we'll look at that idea at another time. In the meantime, I recommend to get yourself a hobby. Thank you very much.